I'm also going to include the live transcript as well. And we are going to broadcast on Facebook as well. So I can do that. You know what? I'm gonna have to do that later because it's not driving for me right now. But anyway, welcome everyone. My name is Lucy Gray, and I'm the co-founder along with Don Buckley of Actionable Innovations. We are right now a professional learning community for people who are interested in educational innovation. Anyone is welcome to join us as long as they want to teach, learn, and share about innovation. And we do three things. We talk about innovation, we write about innovation, and hopefully one day we will have a project to work on where we will be consulting on innovation in education. So that's kind of where we're at. We've been going at this for several months now, and this is one of several actionable innovations conversations that we've held every Friday. And right now we're really kind of exploring topics that are related to innovation, but we're also planning on adding more regarding entrepreneurship and other topics. So I just want to put this out to anyone who's listening or who's part of this today, that we'd love to have you join us. We have a Slack group, and there's more behind the scenes if you want to be part of it. And you can email me at Lucy Gray Consulting. It's Gray with an A. And I'll send you more information about it if you want to join us. Today, we are joined by Bea Leiderman from Virginia, who is going to share with us her work and ideas around Scrum and how that can be leveraged to bring more collaboration and teamwork into your classroom. And I've known Bea for a long time. We were Apple Distinguished Educators together, and she's a lovely human being, and I know all of you are going to enjoy meeting her. She is the newest person, one of the newest people to join our Actionable Innovations group, and we're so happy to have her here. So I'm going to turn this over to Bea. Thanks for coming, Bea, and we can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, so my name is Bea, and I am an instructional technology coach. I've been doing this work for since 2007, and I've been teaching since 2001. I was a Spanish teacher in the classroom, and then I transitioned to be technology coach. And my belief is that you cannot just use technology in education without addressing big changes in everything else that you do. I'm going to share my screen, and I want to talk about work that I feel very passionately about. This is, this is something that I have been working on for a very long time, and it's, okay, here we go. So it's something that I just absolutely adore. It's something that helps teachers bring in group work. That is not something that is easily done all the time by everybody. So this provides a framework so everybody can at least start moving in that direction. When we talk about what happens in a classroom, we focus on assessment a lot. And sometimes when assessment and the results of the assessment and the data collection is what we think about the most, we stop seeing kids as humans and we see them as data points. And it's very easy to fall into that and deny that you're doing it, but still kind of be in that sort of, hang on, I'm going to do something here. Oh, yes, it's very easy to fall into that and then have that problem. So when I talk to teachers, they have this idea that they cannot do projects, and they usually tell me that there's no accountability or equity because one kid's going to take over and do all the work and nobody else is going to be doing any of the work, or they are going to stand around and chit chat and waste all their time and you're not going to get anything done, or it's fluffy and it does not do the learning objectives as efficaciously as if you deliver the content to them and then quiz them, and you know they got it because you quizzed them and they got it and they passed the quiz. The problem is that again, when we teach like this, we are not addressing the kids as humans who need skills that are not tested in what we traditionally test in school. So the way I've addressed this is by introducing Scrum, which originally is a word that comes from rugby, and it means that everybody's going to be moving in the same direction towards the same goal, which is what you want in a team. So you're in rugby, when you scrum, you're trying to get possession of the ball, and everybody's focus is in that direction. Then this was adapted to the software industry, and it's a framework so that teams can work together. But what we do in education is we provide a framework for learning how to work together and to manage tasks to get them done, because you can't have this thing of telling kids, well, just figure it out, work together. You have to teach the kids to work in teams. It's not something that just pops fully formed out of their brains and into their daily lives. So in software, you have, in the industry, you have a client, and then you have software, that's your product, and then you have a budget. In education, your client is the teacher. The kids are producing something that is going to be for the teacher. And what the kids are producing is not software, although they could be coding, but it's a student project that they're working together on. And there's a budget. It is not a monetary budget. It might be like if you have to buy resources, but usually your budget is the time that you have in class with your students to work on a project. And by the way, I don't believe in doing projects at home. If you're going to be a project-based learning environment, you're going to do the work in the classroom where the teacher can provide feedback and do it all. It's not something that you send home and then, you know, sometimes the parents do it for kids. We've all seen that happen sometimes. So the next thing that you have to think about is that you cannot field a team of goalies. Teams have to be diverse, and teams have to be diverse in a way that meets the function of the team. So when you talk to kids about forming teams, it's okay if you want to assign the kids into teams, but teaching kids to form their own teams and to understand how to form the team so that the team is productive is another important skill. So you have to tell kids, when you select a team member, what skill does that team member bring that you need as part of your project? What are you going to have to do when you create this project that that person can contribute? And if you make a team with your friends only, are you going to have a hard time giving them tough feedback and saying that needs improvement, or I don't like what you're doing and we need to do it differently? Or are you going to be able to take feedback from your friend when you know that they're trying not to hurt your feelings? So it's moving beyond the very superficial teamwork that we see in classrooms sometimes, and really thinking about the function of a team and addressing that as, you know, tiny little professionals. So when kids have to decide what skills they want to bring to a team, they need to know what they are good at. And normally in school, we never ask kids, so what are you good at that is not in your grades? And a lot of kids don't see themselves as being good at anything. So what I have done in the past with students is have the kids have a resume in which they put stuff that they know how to do and they like to do, whether it relates to school or not. So it can be a hobby, it can be a sport, anything, because everything gives you a skill, everything gives you a different perspective, and it makes kids see others in their classroom as people as well. It's not just an introspection, but it is also a window into the lives of their classmates that normally doesn't come into the classroom culture. So when you see that everybody has something that they can do that is good for something, somewhere, somehow, and can contribute to the success of your project, then it helps the kids start, it helps the classroom become more of a community of learners where the kids feel comfortable with one another and the kids all feel like they belong, and nobody feels like a waste of space in the classroom, which is always a terrible thing to know when a kid doesn't feel like they belong. So I'm going to go through an example to better illustrate how Scrum works. We're going to start with a task. The task that the teacher has given the students is, we are experts in charge of teaching all 6th grade students how to use one of the tools in the science lab. And this particular team is going to be working on the Bunsen burner. So this is the assignment. The teacher gives the students the assignment and a rubric stating the requirements and the quality expectations for the project. Again, when you, I don't know, I could go and do an entire talk on rubrics as well, but when you talk about rubrics, rubrics can never be just a list of requirements. It has to be the requirements with the quality expectation as well. And it has to be not just the product, but the kinds of behaviors that you expect from students participating in a project. So the digital citizenship requirement, the ethical requirements, cite your sources, treat the people on your team well, and work together and solve your problems. And while if you're going to assign a grade, the grade should come, the bulk of the grade should be from the aspects of the project directly related to your content area. All other things that make kids humans should also be addressed, because those things are going to they're going to humanize your classroom. So the next thing that happens is the students are going to take the assignment and they're going to write the user story. And in this case, the kids have decided to make a video. And this is a place where the kids should have a choice of what they're doing. So if you're teaching a process, you don't necessarily have to make a video. If you want all kids to make a video, you can say that very clearly in your rubric. But in this case, the kids could make a website with all the steps and videos incorporated that are shorter, or they could have a manual that is a printable manual or published online, or an EPUB or whatever it is. So the kids could have choices, but in this case, this group is going to make a video that is a skit that shows the interaction between a teacher and a student going through the process of lighting the Bunsen burner and using it properly. And the important thing is that we are in this team, there is a decision of what the product will be. There is also an indication of the content that's going to be in the video, and the quality is also stated in the user story. And it's not just the user story for the teacher, but there is a purpose for it, because the viewers of this are going to be not just the teacher, but other kids in the class, and maybe kids outside of the class as well. So this is, everybody has seen the memes, like they didn't understand the assignment or they understood the assignment. This is where you make sure that students know exactly what it is you are expecting from them as the client of the product. So then all these things get taken out of the user story, and this is where the kids make a plan of action. What are they going to do? And so each one of the content areas, each one of the bits that is going to be in the video, they have to decide what they're going to do to get it into the video, and then they also have to address the part that makes the video polished and interesting. And these are called story points because they come straight out of your story. But what happens next is you're going to organize them in logical order, in a logical sequence that prioritizes the most important parts that are going to be in the project. And if you were to ask a kid at the end of the project, any student should be able to tell you the story going through these story points. First, we did some research, and then we developed some scripts, and then we made a video, and then we made the video really nice by adding music and whatever it is. So it is a story because it follows a sequence. And when kids do this, then they need to prioritize, they need to know to prioritize the stuff that would make what we call the minimum viable product, meaning they have to get the work done that's going to get the content put together, instead of, like, I'm sure we've all seen it happen where you give the kids an assignment and they open a document and then they spent the first 20 minutes deciding what the font of the title should be. And then the time is all gone in things that are not important because they didn't prioritize and get things done when they needed to get them done. So you prioritize the most important work, and it doesn't mean that because you've put these here, then it's carved in stone. It's never carved in stone, and you can decide that you're missing bits and add them at a later date. So once you have your backlog, all the story points form the backlog, and the backlog means the work that hasn't been done yet. So this is all stuff that has to get done. So because we're going to be manipulating these in many different ways, it's important to have them in a format that can be manipulated. If it's a single piece of paper and these are written one line after another, you can't very easily take it apart and do stuff with it. And I'm going to go through this using the easiest and cheapest and most universally accepted way of doing this in schools that I have seen, especially if you're going with younger kids all the way to older kids. You can use sticky notes. So one sticky note per story point, and that's your backlog. And they can be on a whiteboard. The problem with a whiteboard is that if you have multiple groups coming into the same classroom, then you run out of whiteboard space. So you can have a portable Scrum board, a portable backlog and Scrum board. But you can also use an online shared spreadsheet. And you can also use a professional tool. There's this thing called Trello that I've used before and I love it. There are others, but Trello is the one I know and I love. And they do have free accounts that limit the number of features that they offer, but you can teach kids, even very young kids. I've used Trello with kids as young as 4th grade to use Trello, also spreadsheets, but I'm going to go through this example using the sticky notes because anybody can do this regardless of what requirements or restrictions they might have in their own classroom or in their own school. So when you have your backlog, you need to have a manila folder. And on the front of the manila folder, when you work with young kids, they love this part. They make a name for their team and then they have to write the names of all the team members and then they can decorate it with stickers or drawings or whatever. And this is a folder that becomes the Scrum board. And on the inside of the Scrum board, this is where you have your backlog. This is the work that needs to get done. When the kids get together to work, every kid will select an item from the backlog and move it to the doing section. And these are the things that are happening. And sometimes when you start work, you realize that you're missing things or that you need work done during lag time. So for example, these are the 2 first items that need to get done. Nothing else can happen until these 2 things are done. But if you remember, we have a 3rd person in the team. So we can't just have a 3rd person, watching us work. So it's important sometimes to come up with something that's missing that is also part of the product that is going to be useful. So at any given point in time, if there are 3 team members, there should be 3 items that are being worked on at the same time. So the kids are looking at each other's work constantly, but when it's done, the done items move off the doing section and the kids go and pick something new. There is no transition time. There is no, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. There's always something to be done. And this is something that the team has organized together. So they are all committed to getting it done. They all agreed when they did this, that this is how the work was going to be done. So when things are done, those sticky notes, you cannot throw them away. Everything that you do has to be saved. And so you move it to the done section of the Scrum board. And I've added a Ziploc bag to the back of my folder here because when you stick things to the outside of the folder, they're not going to stay there. So you just store everything. Now, every sticky note that goes in that bag has the name of the person who did that task so that there's accountability. The students know who did what, and most importantly, there has to be a common definition of done for the team, meaning the entire team has to agree that whatever was done meets the standard of quality that the team has set forth in the user story. Is this polished? Is this complete? Can we do it any better? So the team has to assess their own work before they decide that it's done and we're ready to move on to the next step that we're going to do. So every time something's done, the team comes together and they look at the work and they give each other feedback and then they can move on. And they have to learn to mediate those conversations. So in order to have those conversations, there are 2, some people call them ceremonies. I just call them meetings. There are some people that are very cult-like about Scrum. So the students have to have stand-up meetings, and they're stand-up meetings because you stay on your feet, so you do it quickly and you move on to the next thing. If you sit down, you get comfortable, and then in your mind, you can take as long as you want just chit-chatting about things. So you have an opening stand-up meeting at the beginning of a work session. And at that time, you review what you've done already. You talk about what will be done. So each student sets goals for the day. And then they have a conversation if anybody's stuck on something. Like if there's something that was not finished the previous time, is it going to be finished today? Should it be finished today? Is there anything that we need? Do we need to go to the teacher? Do we need to ask help from another team? Whatever it is, you need to make those determinations. And this is where having somebody who's like the spokesperson for the team is important. You have to have someone who's a Scrum Master. And the Scrum Master is, it's about leadership in service. You're not telling people what to do, you're serving your team as the liaison and the leader that leads the conversations, but does not necessarily dictate anything. So it's a great role for kids to rotate when they're in teams. So it's not always the same person, so they'll get to practice those skills of mediating conversations and being the spokesperson when they have to go and ask for help somewhere. At the end of the session, again, there's a closing stand-up meeting, and then the kids review what they did today. Did they meet their goals? Did they not meet their goals? What are they going to do the next time they meet? And again, is there anything that is a problem? Did a new problem show up before? So I will address questions about grades. Lucy just asked, I have done this with kids as young as second grade all the way through high school. So you dial it down to the level that the kids need. So for example, I would not use Trello with second graders, but I would not necessarily require that seniors in high school use a sticky note on a folder. So you adapt and you work with the teachers, and whatever the teachers and the students feel comfortable with, you can adapt this. So there's the stand-up meeting, and then there are meetings with the teacher because the teacher has to give feedback. And another pushback that I get from teachers when I say, oh, let's do a long-term creative project with kids is, well, I need to have grades in the grade book. And as much as I hate to talk about grades, it's the reality that you have to have grades in the grade book. So this timeline is going to show you some ways of assessing the project, giving the kids feedback while the project is happening, while the project is being executed. So the first thing you do is you assign your task, and then there's a user story that's produced. That is the first check-in. You're going to talk to the kids and make sure that what they've produced as their user story matches what you've assigned them to do. And it's going to allow them to be successful according to the rubric. So you're setting expectations as a teacher, but the students in the user story are setting expectations for themselves. And that's the first conversation that the teacher and the students have. Then the students create a backlog. And again, you have to look at the backlog to make sure that the kids are not missing, that there are no giant holes in it that the kids have not noticed. And it's important to get the teacher to look at it, or even to have kids look at each other's backlogs, because when you look at your own work, you have blind spots. And it's true for adults and it's true for kids. So you have to have somebody else take a look at what you're doing. Then the kids get to work, and there are regular check-in points, and those are they're called product reviews. So you're going to review the product, and you can do it at set intervals. But what I have found is that it works better if the teacher has a rotating schedule and is meeting with the teams at short intervals constantly, because it helps the kids know that there's a meeting with the teacher coming, and they have to have some progress, and they have to have something to show, and they also have a chance to have a long conversation if there's something wrong. So let's say there are 5 teams in the class, and as the students start working, the teacher will meet with team number 1 and team number 2 and maybe team number 3, and maybe class ends. So tomorrow or the next day when class starts again, the team will meet with team number 4 and then move on to team number 5 and maybe move again to team number 1, and keep rotating through all the teams during work sessions. So these are not long meetings, or they don't take a lot of time, but it is important to have conversations that are meaningful and that address what's happening with the team. So during the product review, you're going to assess progress, and you're also going to assess process. So in the progress, you're going to focus specifically on the product, the quality of the product, how far along is it? Is it on track to meet the goals that were set forth in the user story? And is there anything that has already been done that needs to be improved? And then in the process, you're going to focus on the teamwork. How are the work sessions going? How are the stand-up meetings going? Do we need to rotate the Scrum Master? Do we need to have a conversation about anything else? Do we need to eliminate any process that you guys are doing that's not helping you meet the goals? And the other thing that is important is to document these meetings. One thing that I really like is taking notes with kids during the meeting using an online spreadsheet so that each comment is addressed in a different line of the spreadsheet. And then in the columns, you can have your comment and you can have your suggestions. And then there should always be a place for the students to respond to what you said, either on the spot while you're having conversation, or later they can come in and say something about it. And this feedback, it's dated and it's left there. You don't change what you've already done. You just keep adding lines at the bottom, because this is a record of the progress that the students are making. So there's progress made, that you can see the progress as the backlog gets smaller and the doing gets transferred out and it moves into the done column. As things are getting done, you see that there's progress, but you also see that the work is improving and that the students are hopefully improving their teamwork and improving everything according to the feedback. So you can also talk to kids about assessing their response to feedback. If I told you that something was not high quality enough for the product, for the project, did you really take the time to go and do something about it? Either look at it and come back and justify why it is the way you did it and say, no, this is my choice and it needs to be this way because of whatever, or did you just, slop right through it to get it off of the doing and into the done and move on to the next thing? So it makes the kids think about their own process and their own work and the quality of the work that they're producing. I can't look at the questions right now. So when I do this feedback, I didn't do this when I first started working in Scrum, but I've come across this WISE feedback framework that I find very helpful and very useful. And when I first started as a teacher, my mentor always told me that I had to give the kids a compliment sandwich where I told them something really good so that they came into the meeting feeling good. And then I gave them all the bad stuff in the middle and then walked away giving them something good again. The problem with that is that kids know when you're giving them a compliment that is totally made up and undeserved. It's just about something totally unimportant. So if you're telling the kids, if you're praising them for something that is not really good, the kids know it breaks the trust that you have with your students. So if you use WISE feedback, there is a building of trust so that the students understand that what you're telling them is real. And with WISE feedback, the first thing you do is you set high standards, then you make sure the kids know that they can meet the standards. You would not let them, you would not give them work that they're not qualified to do, or that they are going to struggle so badly that they're going to be frustrated. And then the next thing is when the kids are working, they need to have actionable suggestions in their feedback. It can't be just, this is disorganized, and walk away saying this is disorganized. You can say this is disorganized. Here are some strategies to get it organized. So it should always be actionable. And that's why the meetings in the product review focus specifically on the product and comparing the product to what the kids said they were going to do in their user stories. So you set your high standards with your rubric. That's where you tell the kids what the assignment is and what you're expecting from them. Then the students are going to set their own high standards by producing a user story that sets the goal for the project. And they're not going to make a user story that's impossible for them to meet. So that's where the teacher and the student decide what the high standard is and what the students are capable of doing. And then during the product review, you give the kids feedback with actionable suggestions so that they can improve and meet and bridge the gap between their user story and what they have as a product at the moment. So back to this, you've assigned your task, you've had a user story, you've had a backlog, the kids are working, and when the kids are done, it's always very important to have a public demonstration of the product or a public showing of the product. Show it to somebody other than the teacher, especially if you've asked them to do something and you've originally said, yeah, imagine you have people coming in and doing whatever. You need to set the stage so that they can actually do that, because it gives the project credibility. And especially if you do a project like the one that I just went through, if the kids are making learning tools for each other, then you have to use those learning tools because you have to showcase the work that the students have done. It makes the work real when it's real and not just for grade. So if you have the opportunity, make sure that you do have that public demo of the product. So I'm going to play a video. This is a teacher that always did projects and always ran into the projects going off the rails big time. And it was very frustrating for her. We worked together for a long time. And when we finally discovered this idea of Scrum, she was one of the people who adopted Scrum and really ran with it. And I did film the interview, but I did not prompt any of the answers. So. Is there no audio? Oh, I'm sorry. There's no audio in the video. Hang on.
I wonder if it's something in the Zoom settings.
I'm looking.
It should just do it. It should just be okay.
Hang on. Let me stop sharing and then I'll share again and see what I can figure out. I apologize. Share sound and optimize for video clip. And let's see if this works. All right, let's try it again.
I'm really interested in project-based learning and anything project-based, and I've been teaching that way my whole career and trying to get better and fix certain things about using projects that have become challenging for certain teachers or are challenging with certain groups of students or are challenging for my content area, which is Spanish. And so I wanted to hear from these teachers who had successfully implemented this method that seemed to alleviate all of those challenges and thereby, alleviate any excuse anyone might have not to do project-based learning. And I went and heard about it. Bea Leiderman and Joe Beasley and Jim Frago gave a workshop and taught us about it, and it all made sense. Like, as soon as you learn what the system actually is, you realize that we want students to work in groups because we want them to be able to communicate effectively. We want them to face challenges and problem solve together. We want them to be independent thinkers, strategizing together, producing things, to be proud of what they do, to be invested in something, to stay engaged during a time limit, all of these things that we want them to do. And the Scrum system makes that possible. It's a framework that's very easy for students to use with support and adults to use. This is from the professional world, in which they, every group member has something to do the entire time work is being done. Everyone is in the muck, running in different directions, and it's all very, loud and messy and fun, but it's so organized because each member is doing a specific thing that the group together has planned out is necessary for the success of whatever the next step is of what they've undertaken. And so that so far is what I love. I have one example that springs to mind. It's a student who's done relatively little most of the year, and I haven't had behavior issues from him, but just a lack of engagement in almost anything, no matter how fun, no matter what topic. I can't get him interested in music or politics or fiction or movies. I'm not really sure how to target him. He doesn't want to choose things, he doesn't speak up. But in Scrum, he's working with the group of guys, and they just ask him, they're like, okay, so what part do you want to do? Well, do you like this? And he has to answer them, because it's not me asking him because it's class. It's a peer asking him something because they want to know the answer genuinely. They want to know what he thinks. And so suddenly he has to decide that he thinks something. And that was a little bit challenging, I think, the first time they were working together. And now they're a couple of weeks into a project that's going to be concluded today and tomorrow. And he's been an active contributor. It's his first time doing that, so he's not the supreme leader of anything, but this is a student who maybe has never contributed ever to anything academic. Can't wait to get out of the room. And now he's like, hey, are we gonna work on our thing today? Are we gonna do that thing today? He won't say Scrum yet, but eventually.
So that is the teacher perspective. And I have this video, the audio is a little rough, but these are kids talking about their own experiences. And just listen to them. Again, unprompted. These are groups of kids that had been working in Scrum together for several projects in the same groups. And it was their second year working in a classroom in Scrum. They are 6th grade students.
So Scrum is like an efficient way to help you get through your project. It's like really organized so everybody knows what they're doing.
It also helps us like get rid of conflicts between our group.
Scrum is a way to get a project done with little or no conflict.
So Scrum is a board and there's a backlog doing and done, and it helps you organize all of your projects so everybody knows what they're doing, even if the Scrum Master is gone.
And there's usually no fighting because we all know exactly what we're supposed to do.
Last year we did a project and we wanted to see if Scrum really helped. So we did a project without Scrum and everybody got really bad grades, but then we did a project with Scrum and it helped people out and it got them organized and everything.
Well, when we feel like we're doing pretty good on the project and like we might finish a little bit early, we might add a couple things to the backlog to keep us like occupied during class and just so that we can give our project a little extra pizzazz.
When we come up with an idea, we can add it to the backlog.
But if we have that idea, we can stick it to the backlog. And if we are timeful, we can move on.
When we select Scrum teams, Mr. Frago and all of our teachers, they tell us that we need to not pick just our friends.
That everybody's good at something and you should pick your team wisely.
So, for example, so it's their turn and they say like, who has really good art skills? And someone raises their hand and they can say, okay, we want you in our group.
You really come to an understanding with people and realize like I'm relying on you, you're relying on me, and we both have to do our part.
So if one person's absent, it doesn't really hurt us because we can all go into that folder.
And that's what the backlog's for. So if one person's absent, we know what they were doing and we can continue and finish our work.
The backlog is the part where you put everything that you need to do on the project
And who's gonna do it?
and who's gonna do it.
Yeah, the backlog is the most important part because you know what you need to do when you finish a part of the project.
So
My favorite project was probably the selling the colonies because it was really fun. And our Scrum board came in really handy with that because we had to write out our script and know what to do for each scene and like have everything set up for that day.
Our stand-up tells us what we're gonna do today.
Yeah,
Well, at the end of class, we tell each other what we need to do better and what we need to do next time. Then when we come, we tell each other what we need to do this time.
I've learned that you don't need just 4 friends. You can have more than just 4 friends. Because I used to have friends, but now I have many. And you make friends, that's good.
It actually lifts like a big stone off your back, just knowing that you know what to do and you know what you finished, so it's like an accomplishment.
We'll get new friends from it because we have to talk with them and cooperate.
But you
If you work for a certain business that doesn't use Scrum, you can introduce that and possibly get money just for introducing a Scrum. It works out.
And also with Scrum, it can help you like improve your position and job. Like if your boss sees you how organized you are, you might get a raise and a new position, like a higher position. And also it could probably help you get a better job because you can help with like other people around you.
So I love that video, and those kids said hilarious stuff. I had probably 2.5 hours of video. I could have just gone on adding more stuff, but I needed it short. And so a lot of what you heard, both from Olivia, the teacher, and from all the kids, is that they are truly engaged in what they're doing. They really believe that they belong in a team that has a goal and has a purpose. And one of the things we noticed, we weren't tracking it officially, but we noticed that a lot of kids that had absenteeism problems were coming to school because they didn't want to disappoint their team. They were making an effort to come to school. Like I heard one kid one time in the parking lot yelling at his mother because she scheduled an orthodontist appointment and he was going to miss this one particular block where they were going to have a product review and he wanted to show his work. So the kids really wanted to be there. They really wanted to work and they really wanted to be a part of something. And so I always think back to what engagement really looks like and what causes misbehavior in schools. And I think engagement is key. These are Schlechter's levels of engagement. If kids are engaged, they believe in what they're doing. They do it because they feel they'll benefit from doing it. The next level is strategic compliance. Those are the kids that know how to play at school and they do it because they know it's going to get them the grade. And they could take it or leave it, but it's going to make their parents happy when they bring a nice report card home or whatever, but they're not really buying into it. Then you have the ritual compliance. Those are the kids that will do things just enough to not get in trouble. And then you have the kids who just don't do anything because they don't believe that it makes a difference for them. And then the kids who are so disengaged that not only do they want to be disengaged, but they want to disengage everybody else. And then that's when they become disruptive. So when you make sure that kids feel like they belong, they're engaged, they want to do the work, they believe in the work that they're doing, you have fewer kids at that lower level and you're going to have a much more productive learning environment. So going back to this slide that I showed earlier, I don't do projects because Scrum addresses every single one of these issues. And in addition to that, it teaches the kids a bunch of other skills that make them human. It makes them more than a data point for your state test. And this is what I love about projects and I love about having kids work in teams. And I think that's the end. So if anybody has any questions, I'm going to stop sharing and take questions.
That's so awesome, Bea. Thank you so much for sharing with us. How long is this, out of curiosity, you developing this work and applying it to your teaching? How long have you been doing this, and what made you discover this as the secret sauce?
So this was maybe 2015, right around there. We had a teacher who was doing a project and needed a parent volunteer. And the parent volunteer came in and said, oh, why don't we teach the kids? Because they were working, it was an iPad classroom, but they had desktop computers, just 5 of them, I believe, for using with Scratch. And Scratch only ran on the desktop. So the kids had to take turns doing the coding. And this teacher said, well, the volunteer said we can do sprint coding, and introduce the idea of making the backstory and dividing it into tasks so the kids could be at the computer with a very particular task and then take turns. And it would still be, even though they were not all at the computer at the same time, there were other kids doing other things. When they were at the computer, they knew what the next step was. And so the kids that participated in that project did so well that the teacher was like, can we do this with everything? And can we adapt it to projects that are not like a relay race, but everybody working? And so this guy brought books and talked to us about it, and we started using it. And then he was in between jobs and he decided to switch careers and become a teacher. So he became a teacher at the middle school. I was at the middle school, and he had been volunteering at the elementary school. And so over the span of a year, we worked out the kinks and tried it out with kids. And it worked really well. I have to say that it worked much better when you introduced the system to young kids, because they were much less likely to balk at the idea of having to write a story and break it into story points. The older kids at first saw that as a big waste of time and they didn't want to do it. So you had to really, really, really talk and get them to, convince them to get it done. But once they did it one time and it worked, after we did it in classrooms and the kids had like after the first couple of years that we had really worked and pushed and pushed and pushed, the kids are going into other classrooms and saying when they were in teens, like they were in a classroom where they had to do a team project, but the teacher had not officially introduced Scrum. The kids would teach their team members to use Scrum and be like, this is how we need to stay organized. I'll make the spreadsheet, or I'll start the Trello board, or whatever it is they were using. And the kids were the ones who were pushing it. And then when the kids were in committees that were doing stuff outside of the classroom, they started using Scrum. So for example, they planned the homecoming dance with Scrum. They brought Scrum to the yearbook class. And by this point, I was at the high school only, because I'd been going to all the different schools. Then I was only at the middle school and high school. Now it's like only at the high school. And the kids had moved from the 6th grade up and we're now at the high school. And so I had my little experts in the 9th grade, and they just started teaching the teachers how to do this. So the kids were the ones who led the effort, and because they really believed in it. And one of the last things that I did while I was at that school was the kids were organizing a community-wide outside of school volunteer day for all the kids at the high school to volunteer outside of the high school. And the committee that was putting this together was the Principals Advisory Committee. And so the principal said, oh, my kids are going to be doing this. Can you come and teach them about Scrum? So that, because I think this might be a good way to introduce them to Scrum. And so I, go from my office and I've got this presentation prepared for the kids, and I walk in and I'm like, oh, you know how to do it. You know how to do it. Like there were several of the kids in the group that had been in my Scrum classes that I had seen go through Scrum. So they stood up and they taught the group, the kids, the few that didn't know about it, the kids are the ones who taught everybody how to do it. And then they implemented Scrum to organize a countywide volunteer day. They, designed the t-shirts, get vendors to make donations. Like the kids did all the work, organized bus transportation to the different locations, donations for lunches to be delivered to the different locations. And they did all this on their own. So I know it works. Now, the youngest kids that I worked with while I was there are now seniors. So I wish I could go back and see them and see what they're up to.
I bet they're still scrumming. How do adults respond to Scrum when you do it with them? And I'd be curious as how they feel about it.
I think it's harder for adults to buy into it. But I have done workshops for groups of teachers where we spent the whole day, like rather than lecturing about Scrum, I organized it and walked the teachers through the process. So the one that was the most fun was I went to Detroit to work with some teachers, and I told them, I think it was early March, late February. Anyways, it was 23 degrees for the high, and I'm from the tropics. For me, that's like a nightmare. And I was very unhappy to be in Detroit with everything just frozen. Like there were chunks of ice floating down the river, and that's not for me. So I told the teachers that they had to convince me that I had to come back to Michigan for something. And they worked together in Scrum to create a social media campaign. So as they were doing it, I said, okay, plan the social media campaign to bring me to Michigan. And then I said, okay, now these are my requirements. You have to make this an appetizing place for a person who does not like the cold weather, but likes outdoor stuff, but also likes, museums and theater. And they had to plan it out. So I said, write me a statement. Like, I'm the business owner. You write me a statement. Okay, now what are you going to do to meet that? And so I walked them through the process. They wrote the user story. They wrote the story points. They created a backlog. And then throughout the day, they started doing stuff. And they actually started tweeting stuff out as if the campaign were real. And it was hilarious. So at the end of the day, they had gone through the whole process of working in Scrum. And there was a group of the people that were there that they all knew each other from working together. But there were a bunch of people who were new, and they all walked away being really good friends. And so the best way to do it is not to do it like I just did it today, like I'm telling you about it, but the best way to do it is to guide people through the process.
So your husband has a question, and Amy Yurko has a question. You want to shoot, Bill?
Well, she already kind of answered my question, which was how people are using it outside. And I think the fact that the kids wanted to keep using it was a real sign of the value of it and the engagement of it. And I think that's something that I think has been really inspirational. I don't know, do you want to talk more about that, Bea, or?
Yeah, I always like it when kids learn something, like at the very end of the video when the kids were talking about, oh, you can get more money and you can get a promotion. You know, they're making connections to being organized. And I mean, I've been in workplaces I'm kind of old now. So I've been a teacher since 2001. I was in other workplaces before that. I'm a career switch. And I don't think anybody ever at any point in my life taught me how to be part of a team. Like everybody just says, well, just work it out, just talk about it and come to a compromise. But there is no framework for coming to a compromise. And there is no structure for, sorry, there is no structure for structuring the work in a way that can be addressed by a team without conflicts. So that's what I see as the value of this. You're learning for life and not for a test. And in learning for life, you're also learning the content that you have to test.
I love that. That's great. Amy is our resident architect and school planner, and she has a question too.
Hi, terrific hearing from you. Yeah, no, I, as an architect, and we design the spaces for, you know, these kinds of activities. I'm wondering if you've seen different kind of spaces that work better than others. Would it benefit from a different kind of space that maybe you don't have? Is there something that you'd like to be able to do, but you can't because there's no space for it? You know, sort of linking the facility side. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So there was a grant that we could apply for, and we got furniture for the rooms. You know, like there was a couple of years, there's a couple of years where people were like going on and on about flexible seating. We actually applied for a flexible seating grant with Scrum in mind. And we actually got maintenance to come in and tear down a counter. You know, some schools have labs where there are these counters and you can't move them because they've got like gas coming from the Bunsen burners and water for the sinks and stuff. And the kids, it was a lab that was no longer being used as a lab because the labs were being done differently at the school, and these counters were there for absolutely no good reason other than, you know, kids couldn't get to the board because the board was behind the counter. And so we actually took out anything that couldn't be moved. And as part of the grant, we got whiteboard material for an entire wall. And we got little portable projectors. And eventually we replaced that with Apple TVs and big monitors so that the kids could share. Like we decided that the Promethean board, as cool as it was a very teacher-centered technology. So we turned it into a workspace. And so we gave the kids the drivers for Promethean so that they themselves could connect to the Promethean board and do a demo for their team. So the space has to be flexible. You have to be able to reorganize the furniture and have enough space for the kids to spread out so that they are working together in the same space so that they can turn around and yell out at the kid. Do you remember when we did this? Can you show me how to do that? That kind of thing. You don't want the kids working, even as a team, as an isolated team. They need to be together so they can still share ideas and hear each other's conversations and borrow and share ideas all the time. But there has to be enough space that they can actually huddle and get stuff done. So it has to be, I don't know. There were classrooms that were bigger and classrooms that were smaller, and working the smaller classrooms was challenging. So we always end up sending kids out to the hallway. But when you send kids out to the hallway, you don't hear what they're saying and they don't hear what the rest of the students are saying. So
yeah, it sounds a lot like architecture school.
Yeah. So bigger spaces with all movable stuff and lots of ways of sharing information visually. Whiteboards, projectors, screens, but also you needed like there was this one particular classroom that had a storage space next to it. And we emptied out the storage space and turned it into like that little green room where the kids were talking. That was that room. It had been a storage closet and we made it into a recording studio. So you do need to have places where kids can go and do the creative work, like filming and recording and having a session. Like if they're having an argument, they need privacy to resolve the argument. So these are all considerations that just, you know, it's like there are things beyond content delivery when you're working in a classroom environment like this one. So there's a question about how long does it take to get things, like to get the tasks done. Some of these are, I would say that you take one class period, or like say 45 minutes to an hour and a half, a block to go over what the assignment is and have the kids brainstorm their ideas and then decide on one idea and then decide, like, I think from assignment to having a backlog, you have maybe one 45-minute block or one 90-minute block, maybe two at the most. The thing is, this is something, Scrum is something that if you do it once and never again, you waste all the learning. So this is something that you adopt as a framework for project-based learning, and you do it over and over and over again, because the first time you do it, you're working out the kinks. And as you go, the teams become more consolidated. And one thing that we found out was that sometimes the kids liked working together and they wanted to stay together as a team. They did not want to, in the next project, go to a different team. Sometimes the teams decided to break up and go work with other people, but sometimes the teams decided to stay together over several projects. And it was something that as the kids got to know each other better, they would like exchange a look, like you would assign something and you would see the kids just looking at each other like, oh, we know what we're doing. Like it was really, I don't know, very satisfying to be in a classroom where the kids were so connected that they did that kind of work.
So we're just at 2 o'clock. Can you stay on a little bit longer, Bea?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. If anybody needs to leave, please feel free to do so. But I'm wondering, I know that we have some people here that use Scrum too. And I'm wondering if anybody like Don or Kristen want to share how they've used Scrum in their classes at all.
Sorry, Lucy, I have not used Scrum and I'm not in a classroom right now, but my husband is in software engineering and uses Scrum all the time. And so I hear that end of things, and I've never seen it presented this way for students. So this was really, really great. And I appreciate your time, Bea. Thank you so much.
I thought you did. Sorry, I had to put you on the spot.
No worries. I don't mind saying I haven't done it before.
Okay. And Don, you definitely have used it, right? Is he there? I can't see anybody because I have.
No, I use different project frameworks, but it's the same idea. I haven't used Scrum. I know it well. I use other frameworks. Here's one. Stuff like that, you know, just to touch points for the students to go back to.
I have people spotlight. Let me take the spotlight off so then whoever's talking can show up. There we go. Okay. Anybody else? Matt Moran, have you used Scrum?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I did with some students. In fact, we tried using Trello with them, and there were some students who like really, this was with high school students, mostly 9th grade. There were some students who really took to using the tool and kind of like took it upon themselves to become the Scrum Master, because they really kind of like understood Trello sort of intuitively and then wanted to take on that role in the group. But I liked Bea's point about kind of rotating that role, which I think would have helped in some cases to have like more ownership and not have it be the sort of thing you often see in projects where one person ends up doing a lot of the work for the group. But yeah, I think like you see it come out of the world of software engineering and trying to like take really big problems and break it down into smaller things that are more actionable. And so it seems like it's really well aligned for this group in particular.
It's the bane of every kid's existence. I mean, I think every kid knows there's always going to, there's going to be somebody who doesn't pull their weight and they resent that, so I think anything you can do to mitigate that. But I think that's probably, I just feel like I listen to my own kids talking about working on group projects and people not carrying their fair share. And it's something that I think they think about. Anybody else want to weigh in? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that I think that idea of having the students sign off too on whether it looks like the story like task has been accomplished, it seems really great. Is that actually like something that's part of Scrum, to have like the team sign off on something being completed? It's not just like an accommodation for this.
Yes, the idea of having a definition of done. So the team the team defines when things are done. It's not like I completed the task. It's I completed the task, and it is at the level of quality that the team accepts. So that's the accountability piece. I don't just do work and say I did it and toss it off as fast as I can. I do it and my team gives me feedback that lets me know I did it at the level of quality that the team expects. So it really makes the kids be much more introspective about their own work, because it takes away that idea of, well, the teacher doesn't like me, so the teacher is going to give me a bad grade. It is all about, I'm doing this for my team, and my team thinks I didn't do such a great job. I should accept their feedback and try a little harder. And if I can't do any better, then that's when I need to advocate for myself. Can somebody help me or show me or teach me? Because when you're in an environment like this, the kids are very unlikely to just say, well, screw it, I'm not doing it. Because it's not the teacher, it's their team members that are asking. And so the kids, there's a lot of peer coaching and peer teaching. Like the kids are.
One of my clients had a high school. It wasn't specifically Scrum, but very similar. I don't think they just called it that, but it sounds very similar. But at a high school level, the students would call, team members would call each other the night before and make sure everybody had a ride and that you're going to be there on time. Because they were counting on you, and they were also accountable to each other to help you get there. I mean, just show up,
Right.
So it's kind of cool how that accountability works, and it works both ways.
A while ago, Marcy asked, she wondered how it works when tasks that weren't included in the original story. How do students manage that? How do they manage new assignments or new things that they're discovering?
So it kind of comes up naturally at the stand-ups when the kids look at what they've done before and what they need to get done. And if they notice something that's missing, then they can bring it up at the stand-up meeting and propose it. Should we do this? Should we not do this? The kids in the kids talking about Scrum video, the kids talked about that as they're working, they'll realize, and in the example I did, you realize that something hadn't been put in the backlog. There was no introduction script in the backlog, so somebody put it in. So the way we did it is we never assigned the tasks as we made the backlog. The backlog is there, and whoever has time and whoever's done with their task goes and gets something and self-assigns the work. So anything that gets added in the future when somebody's not working, then they take it as their task. So it's not that you make the backlog and I say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. You might start with that, with the stuff that's prioritized at the top of the list. But as you're working during work sessions, if you have finished something, you go grab it and you assign it to yourself. Or if you might say at the stand-up meeting, I would like to be in charge of this. So you put dibs on the task. But it's not like at the very beginning when you do the backlog, everything's already assigned. And there's, the people who treat Scrum like this weird cult, and I don't know, they have all these names for all this stuff. So they call it trimming the backlog. So when you're trimming the backlog, you're maybe taking out stuff that's not going to be necessary after all, or you're adding stuff that you'd forgotten to put in from the beginning. So back to what Dot said about, no, it was Matt that said something about Trello. The one thing that kids absolutely love about Trello is that it is not something made for school. They're like, oh, they feel like such professionals, you know, they're using a real tool from the real world. So it's always good to give the kids real tools.
Yeah, that's super important, B. Like I use as many industry tools as I can, like Mural, for instance, or whatever, because the students really appreciate that. And then what they also love is, because I teach graduate students, I tell them, well, I'm actually using the exact same tool with that. You know, and it's really uplifting and empowering for them.
And I know, and if you're, I would think you would need to adapt it though for younger kids. I mean, I could see middle school and up using some of the tools that we've talked about, but like, I think it would be, I think simplifying it for the second, third grade set might be, I don't know, maybe they could handle Trello.
Well, it's not, you can't have an account if you're under 13 is in their user, in their terms of use, but a Google spreadsheet is a great way to do it. You have your backlog in one column, and then you drag stuff across. You can color code the cells according to who's working on what, and then you can drag it over. Jamboard would be a good idea, but I really like the manila folder with the stickies for the younger kids, because it's very visual off the screen. So if they're doing something else on the screen, they can still look at their Scrum board on the table. And usually that's something that the teacher holds on to. So the stickies on the inside, and they love to decorate the front, and then the done stuff is in the Ziploc bag stapled to the back of the folder. And at the end, you know, there's a celebration that everything made it to the baggie and everything's done, and they throw away and make a new one for the next project. You know, it's cheap and easy, and it works, and it's very visual, and it's very appropriate for the little kids. I mean, we used it even in middle school. And there was one particular project that we did that was very challenging, because it was not a single block of students, but it was 3 different blocks that came to the same room to see the teacher at different times, but they were all working on the same project. And what they were doing was a voter registration drive. And it was a civics class, so they had to, and they wanted not just to have a voter registration drive, but a table at the homecoming game where they were going to staff the table and answer questions about voting, voter ID, where to go to vote, early voting, absentee voting, all that stuff. And they did the whole thing using the whiteboard in the classroom. And so they had one session where they got together and decided what they were going to do and make the backlog. And the teacher had to organize it so that the kids could come out of their regularly assigned classrooms into that classroom just that one time. The kids agreed that they would make up the work that they missed. But once the backlog was done, then the kids would come into the classroom and work. And it was something that the teacher gave 20 minutes out of every block to the project. It wasn't something that they were doing the whole time. They did everything so that homecoming day, they had registry. They talked to the registrar, they got the forms, they got permission. So they got permission to hand out registration forms and stamped envelopes, but we could not. They were specifically told they were not allowed to collect the registration forms. Like there's some rule that they could not do that. So they had to make sure to tell people to put it in the mailbox themselves. So they had a roll of stamps and they had the envelopes and people filled out the address and all that stuff. And then after people registered to vote, there was a little photo booth and they made props so people could hold up a little thing and said, I voted. And they were, asking people to tweet with I registered at the homecoming game or some, I don't know, they came up with hashtags and everything. And then the homecoming game got rained out. It's very sad, but they were ready and they, the kids went home and made sure all their parents were registered and their neighbors. They're like, if we can't do it at the game, we're going to do it, go knocking on our neighbors' doors. And it's a county where houses are very spread out. I mean, it's pretty rural. So even going to 2 or 3 houses was a chore for the kids, but they did it. And they were so proud that they did that. So, it works, you make it work. And the kids were very committed to the project and they all participated. And it was something that was truly connected to life outside of the classroom.
So that's the buy-in is this kind of tool, this kind of procedure framework lends itself to getting student buy-in, and that if you have that, that's the secret sauce, right? To making things happen in a really authentic and deeper way, I would think. And so if we could help, if teachers felt like they had the freedom to use a framework like this, I think that's the other thing that I'm thinking about is, what if teachers haven't had a lot of background in project-based learning and the management of it? I mean, this is what that really is, and feel like they know where to fit it in their day. Like, I mean, I think it would be very easy to do this in social studies, which is, a lower stakes subject area and tends to be project oriented and that sort of thing. What are your tips for teachers who are just getting started with this, who maybe haven't had a lot of autonomy in designing learning experiences? What would you advise them on how to get started with this?
Start small. You don't have to plan a project that takes weeks. That's more advanced. So
Yeah.
you can start with a project that's going to take, a group activity that is not a big creative project, something that's going to take, 1 or 2 blocks only, and do a shortened version of it. Because if it's going to be shortened, you're not going to have a very big backlog. So something like, we used to introduce it with, you're going to make a poster, and we did something as, common as making a poster. You guys are all going to come together and make a poster. And they had to do a story about what the poster is going to communicate based on whatever topics we had for them to choose from. And we kept it very simple. We also sometimes did it like, we did a simulation of Scrum to get started. One time in a math classroom, we did, we're going to pretend that we're making spaghetti dinner, and we're going to serve 100 people spaghetti dinner. And we went, because everybody knows how to cook spaghetti, and put some sauce in it and toss a salad. So we went through that example and we just pretended to do it in like maybe 15-20 minutes. And the kids just like had to act like they were doing it. And they thought it was very funny, but they were 8th graders, and I thought they would find it silly and refuse to do it, but they all did it. And at the end, I'm like, okay, we made dinner. So next time when you're working, because we were preparing to work on, they were going to make review booklets using Book Creator in teams they were going to share them with 4th graders, I believe. And so they were making books for the 4th graders in the 8th grade. And we wanted them to work in groups. And we wanted to explain Scrum before they got started, because the teacher was very nervous about having to teach them Scrum in addition to monitoring the project. So I did just like a little fake Scrum session with them. And we went through it and made spaghetti dinner. But they had to, write a user story together as a class very quickly, then write from that, make all your user points and all this stuff, the story points, and then pretend to do stuff. And I said, if you had to break this into sections, what would you do? So that's the other useful thing when you're planning a project, break it into sections. So maybe you have a research section, and then you have a prototyping and refining section, and then you have a finalizing and preparing to present section. So breaking your projects into manageable chunks, and maybe you do your backlog for this section, and then your backlog for this section, and your backlog for this section separately at different times, so that you can start working. So there are many ways of slicing it into smaller chunks. But yeah, the best way to start is to just plan a project and make it a small one, and walk the kids through it. And even when the kids are like, oh, I don't see the point in doing this, just stick with it, and make sure that the kids stick with it. And then at the end, they'll see that it made sense.
And finally, here's a question. What are some resources that you would recommend for getting started with this? And I'll add to that you should write a book about this. Like, I think, or you could write a chapter for our book when we get it together on using the Scrum methodology, something like that. But I think I haven't seen a lot out there in the plethora of books that are being published or self-published by teachers these days. But I think it would be really helpful to see examples and that sort of thing. So anyway, what are some resources that you would recommend us looking at in the interim before you write your chapter or your book?
So there's a blog post that I wrote that is on the Unfold Learning site that's called Scrum Soup. If you Google it, Scrum Soup, it's a cooking example. I mean, I always, when I'm explaining something that's abstract, I go to a concrete known example. Like, everybody knows how to make soup. So like, everybody knows how to make spaghetti. So cooking is a very, it's my metaphor. my go-to metaphor. So there's a blog post about Scrum, but there's a book. Oh gosh, what's the name of it? The cover is red, and I think it's called Scrum, and it's written by the guy who pioneered the use of Scrum in the software industry. And it's a very useful book because it explains the why of the methodology. Like, why do we, I mean, that's one. Thank you, Bill. It's always on my desk somewhere.
I'm happy to be your Vanna.
There you go, Jeff Sutherland.
Since I'm sitting right next to your desk, it was very easy to go get this.
So that the book talks about how the difference between, I think it was Cascade software development versus Scrum software development. When, if the problem was, if you started with software development and you went through it linear, by the time you were getting here, software was changing so rapidly that by the time you got to where you were ready to show your client something, your client had already changed his mind because somebody else had already done what you thought was original and cool. And so you had to come up with a way to make things happen faster. And when you're working linearly and you have one person does this and then the next person, the next person, the next person, the time is huge. But if everybody's working together, you compress the time. And that's the other way to sell it to students and teachers. If everybody's working at the same time, then the time from beginning to end is shrinking big time, right?
But you've talked about the difficulty of chaos, and especially some people, like some administrators, are going to think it's bad. Do you want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, it's controlled chaos, but it gets loud and it gets crazy. And the important thing when anybody walks into your room is just watch for a moment and listen to the conversations that are happening. Don't just go by the volume, go by the content of the conversations. And I have to say that there's one more thing that's very, very important that happened to us in particular when the two other teachers and I were doing this. And unfortunately, it's very sad that the other two teachers have left education, both. Because we were doing this and people were talking about it and we had presented at conferences about it, people wanted to come and visit. And it got to be such a thing that we had visitors in the building looking at the classes that were working in Scrum, that the kids were just like, oh, let me show you. Like, they would be like, oh, are you here to see my Scrum board? Let me show you my Scrum board. I can tell you all about my thing that I'm making. And the kids were like, little 6th graders, little 4th graders. Oh, would you like to do what I'm making? I'm coding a da 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 da. And they would just, they were very comfortable talking to any stranger that walked into the classroom. Superintendents. We were named an Apple Distinguished School, and we had like school visits with Apple representatives, and everybody would come through and the kids would just show stuff and not mind answering questions. And they were all very self-possessed and very comfortable talking to adults, which also, they said later the kids would talk about how because they had to be in groups with kids that were not their friends and they had to learn to just get along with them, they realized that talking to people is not a scary thing and they could just do it. So that was another big benefit of them working in teams like that.
Marcy, do you have a question?
Yeah, so is this ever written like into a curriculum? Or is it something that the teacher would implement when they see when they create the projects? Because I write curriculum and lesson plans, and as you're talking, I'm thinking about a project that's coming up, and I'm like, I'm not going to sell the teacher on Scrum like in a week, but can I build some of this? Like, I'm thinking like, well, how are the kids going to assign themselves? Like, I was just assuming they were going to assign themselves, but like, maybe that won't happen in the classroom. So I'm almost thinking of like kind of writing some points from Scrum into the curriculum. Is that done?
I've never heard of it being done, like officially putting it into a curriculum. It's always been something that is, that you do to address the curriculum.
Because it makes it like that would be easier than trying to sell a teacher on project-based learning or Scrum specifically, but putting it in there without them even knowing about it or coming up with a name for it would make the project go smoother, and then it would be successful. And then you could say, oh yeah, that was Scrum, you know, like, oh, it's not so bad.
Yeah, you could approach it. I mean, I guess you don't have to give it a name. You could just say, okay, this is what we're going to do today. And then you break the process into the small pieces. Okay, if you were going to write a little 5-sentence paragraph about what you're going to do to fulfill the requirements of the rubric, tell me about it. And then to do that, you know, that's your user story. And then what are the things that you're going to have to do to get to that point? Write them all one line at one, like in different lines. And then, so you could do it without telling the kids we're doing this thing called Scrum. You could just direct them to do certain things. And then say, okay, now everybody get with your team and decide what you're going to do today. And talk about what you did yesterday and how it's going. And if anybody has any problems, and then, okay, let's do your beginning of class meeting every time. Okay, stop what you're doing, put your stuff away, have a meeting. What did you do today? So you can do it without specifically saying, hey, we're doing Scrum. You can just, because we didn't, when we were working with the little kids, like 3rd, 4th grade, we didn't start out by explaining Scrum. We just went in and said, today we're going to do this. Let's do this. And then later we're like, okay, we're going to do this in Scrum. They're like, Scrum, what's Scrum? I'm like, oh, that's the thing we did. And they're like, oh, okay. So then we started teaching them like all the different things that like all the terminology and whatever, because it was easier to say, let's have a stand-up meeting, like then say, okay, let's have a meeting and talk about what we did yesterday. You know, if you have a name for it and the kids understand it, then it's a vocabulary that just comes out of the process. But the only time I ever front loaded the process was that one time with that math class, because the teacher was so reluctant to do it and was not seeing it. And so in order to convince him, I had to do like that fake Scrum with the spaghetti dinner.
I just put a link in the chat. Is this in the, there's an EdWeek article on Scrum in schools, and it looks like it's your school, your old school maybe. You live in Midlothian, right?
Yes.
So is that where you used to work?
No. So a neighboring school division came to visit us, and they decided to implement Scrum, but for the adults only in their central office. In their central office project.
So that's what that's about.
Yeah, I believe that's it. Yeah.
There was some appropriation of the work that Bea and the teams did, where it got borrowed without attribution.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
And then because our superintendent had gone to that school division, and then he claimed ownership of it when he had already left us. Yeah, it turned ugly. Like there were lots of tweets back and forth about it.
Oh, interesting. Drama.
Oh yeah,
drama in the Scrum world.
There's always drama in school. School is a drama place.
So it looks like there's some others. It looks like there's some other resources out there. I just found a teacher's blog on this. So I definitely think we should adapt it for our own purposes in actionable innovations, and we'll have to think about how we do that going forward. But I want to be cognizant of everybody's time, and thank you so much, Bea, for sharing with us. I really appreciate this. And I'm excited to have you get to know everybody in the group. We're a really fun, interesting group with everybody has their own little talent and niche that they're interested in. And, you know, right now we're focusing on writing about innovation. That's our assignment for November, is to kind of write about that. I'm writing a very long post right now that will bore everybody. But in our Medium publication, we have a bunch of new posts this week. We have one from Amy that just came out today. We have one from Don, and we have one from Marcy. So I want to encourage everybody to go to our Inspiring Actionable Innovations Medium publication and leave some comments. I'll put the show notes and the recording in there as well, probably over the weekend from this. And next week, Marcy is going to regale us with her story about 3 Ducks Design, her company that she co-founded with one of her children. And we look forward to that. So I'm going to stop recording without further commentary, but thanks again, Bea. You were terrific. We really appreciate it.